大家好，这里是听广播学英语频道。今天我们来听一个这几天的大新闻：巴尔的摩桥梁坍塌。根据 CNN 报道，巴尔的摩发生了一起灾难性的桥梁坍塌事故，原因是一艘集装箱船撞击了桥梁的支撑柱。搜救行动正在继续寻找可能存在的幸存者，这起事故也导致该地区交通严重中断。那么，现在我们来听听新闻报道吧。
This is CNN Breaking News.
Welcome to Inside Politics. I'm Manu Raju in for Dana Bash, and we're following breaking news. National Transportation Safety Board Chairwoman is about to answer questions on the catastrophic bridge collapse in Baltimore. We'll bring that to you when it begins any minute now. And these are live pictures of what's left of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, where search and rescue teams are desperately looking for survivors in the Patapsco River. This video shows the moment of impact when a large container ship hit a support column on the massive bridge, plunging cars and people into frigid waters. Officials are describing it as a mass casualty event. The damage that you see here up close is just hard to comprehend, especially for the tens of thousands of people that cross over the bridge every day. And that includes Maryland Governor Wes Moore.
We know the Key Bridge. I've ridden over the Key Bridge countless times. So many of us know the Key Bridge because it is our normal commute. This is a place that is a normal commute route for over 30,000 Marylanders every single day. And so to hear the words that the Key Bridge has collapsed, it's shocking and heartbreaking.
CNN's Gabe Cohen is on the scene. Gabe, you have been there for hours talking to officials. What are you learning?
Well, Manu, we know this search and rescue operation is still unfolding just down the river from where I'm standing. I'm going to step out of the way and let you take a closer view of that massive container ship just down the way. You can see mangled pieces of steel, what's left of the Key Bridge, laying across the front of that ship, as well as steel on either side of the boat there down in the water. You can also see there are boats, several of them, still out there with divers that have been searching through the water, still looking for 6 construction workers that are believed to be in the water, still missing. Over the past few hours, they managed to pull 2 people from the water. One of them was basically unharmed, the other taken to the hospital with serious injuries. And look, we are more than 10 hours into this operation at this point, and we are talking about freezing cold water, Manu. I was here, as you mentioned, early this morning. Conditions were brutal. Strong winds, choppy water. Things have definitely calmed down since then. But of course, that is a long time for anyone to be in this water. We have heard from officials who talked about the moments before the bridge collapse, that vessel seeming to lose control, maybe losing power. You talk about flickering lights that we saw just before it collided with the column of that bridge. But we do know they are still very much in search and rescue operation mode. We have seen vehicles along the riverbank not far from the site where this is unfolding. But bear in mind, this is not a small section of river that they are searching. It is a huge part of the bridge that fell early this morning. And so we have watched Coast Guard helicopters and so many, more than a dozen of these rescue boats that have been combing the water, just searching for any indication of life. But the reality is the clock is ticking. We have heard that from first responders, from officials who have given these press conferences, but they have said they are still going through with this search and rescue, even as the morning turns into afternoon. Manu, they are holding on to hope that they can find someone, find people, and save some lives.
Gabe, can you just talk about the people who are saving lives as a result of this mayday call that happened just before this crash occurred?
Yeah, so we heard officials talk about that a little earlier, that as this vessel seemed to be losing control and was heading toward that column, it sent out a mayday call. We don't know the exact timeline of it, but according to officials, transportation crews were given enough time that they were able to stop at least some traffic from getting onto the bridge. We don't know how many cars we're talking about there, but they say as a result, the vehicles that ended up in the water, as well as the 8 people who ended up in the water, they were all part of this construction crew that was up there. Otherwise, it sounds like because of this mayday call, potentially lives were saved and cars were kept off at least this section of the bridge. Because bear in mind, during rush hour, this is a highly trafficked bridge. Of course, this was in the early hours of the morning, but if this had happened during rush hour, Manu, with no warning, we would be talking about dozens, if not more, cars into this river. So they believe that mayday call likely saved lives in this case.
Oh, wow, amazing. And it looked absolutely desperate moments here for in the search and the rescue operation. Thank you, Gabe. Keep us posted, and we'll turn back to you with any new information. I do want to turn now to CNN's Brian Todd, who is actually in a boat live along the Patapsco River. Brian, what are you seeing?
Right, Manu, this is a different angle here from where Gabe was transmitting from. You can see the vessel just over my left shoulder here. We'll zoom in closer to where you can see rescue operations are ongoing here. Several smaller vessels, police vessels, and others just buzzing around the main ship there. That's the Dali, about 1,000 feet long, that slammed into the bridge there. You can see from our angle here, we're about 1,000 yards away, maybe a little bit more. This was a fully loaded tanker ship that just slammed into this bridge with massive force. This was fully loaded because it was outgoing at the time of the accident. And you can see the entire center of the bridge is just gone. Remnants of the bridge on to the left and to the right in the water. And as Gabe mentioned from his angle, you can also see it from our angle. You can see parts of that bridge kind of lying across the bow of the ship itself on the other side there. And you can see some of the damage there as we zoom in tighter here. This, as we mentioned, this is an ongoing rescue operation. The only vessels that are allowed here are rescue and recovery boats. And there have been dive teams in the water all morning. We have mentioned the treacherous conditions for them as well. This water is extremely cold, 46 to 48 degrees Fahrenheit. Very treacherous conditions for divers, and of course for anyone who might have fallen in the water. You can only survive in that water for maybe 1 to 3 hours, according to experts. So the condition of the water and the currents, the water is smooth right now at the surface, but the currents are also a factor here. Pretty strong currents coming in and out of here as we're in the Baltimore Harbor and the Patapsco River area here. What we can tell you also is that this bridge is a very important hub for transportation up and down the East Coast for hazardous material. Hazardous material is not allowed into the tunnels around Baltimore, where most of the vehicle traffic goes up and down the East Coast, but it is allowed on this bridge going up and down the East Coast. So hazmat materials cannot be transported here. This is also a massive disruption because no vessels, no ships, no cargo ships, no container ships can come in or out of here, and that could take days to rectify. I did speak to a gentleman here who's involved in the effort to kind of salvage whatever's left of the bridge. He said it's going to take days just for floating cranes to get here to be able to pull some of this wreckage out of the water. And when they get here, they're going to have to cut parts of the bridge that have collapsed into smaller pieces in order to remove it, and that could take days. So, Manu, that gives you an idea of the disruption here.
Yeah, Brian Todd, thank you for that. A report from the boat. We'll, again, check back in with you as well, especially in this key moment, these desperate moments where hopefully there's some good news in the search and rescue operation. Brian Todd, thank you for that. Now, the White House says that President Biden is actually going to speak and address this incident in just a matter of minutes. He was briefed earlier today, the White House releasing this photo showing this briefing that occurred earlier this morning. We expect him to talk before he heads out to in a campaign event in North Carolina this afternoon. Later this hour, we'll bring that to you live when he does speak. But first, I want to play some sound for you about what happened this morning. This is the emergency dispatch call to the first responders as they were en route to the scene.
Be advised, the entire bridge, the entire Key Bridge is in the harbor. I advise again, the entire Key Bridge has fallen into the harbor.
Joining me now, Andrew McCabe is a former deputy director at the FBI and CNN senior law enforcement analyst, and CNN's Pete Montine, who is live near the scene. Pete, when you see the images of the collapse and you just see how quickly this entire bridge falls into the river, what is your takeaway?
We watched an out of control vessel and this calamity happen really in slow motion. All of this really was very condensed, though, in about a few minutes' time. And really, we're hearing about a crew that was sort of outclassed by the problem here. Transportation Secretary of Maryland, Paul Wiedefeld, tells me that a local pilot from the Baltimore Harbor, the Port of Baltimore, was on board the boat and in command of this ship, 950 feet long, as it careened at 8 knots toward one of the center pilings of this truss bridge. I want you to look behind me. You can still see it in the Patapsco River back there with the containers on it. This ship is about 95,000 gross tons. So a lot of inertia and a lot of mass was headed for this piling. When it hit, just before that, at 1:24, that's when it was cleared on the bridge that there was a problem, and then the lights flickered, and then they flickered once again on board. So what investigators will really want to know now is what really entailed the power loss. What did that mean, and what did that mean for the controllability of this boat? The NTSB will brief us here at 1 p.m. That will probably be a very preliminary, just the facts, ma'am briefing. And then we will get a little bit more information as the day goes on. Typically around 7, 8, 9 p.m. is usually when they brief after something like this, and they will sort of lay out the details as they're getting them, at least preliminarily. But really, this is something that was a crew that was really outclassed by this issue, and they were not able to stop this boat in time. We also want to know how steerable and how controllable this ship was after this incident happened, after the apparent loss of propulsion. You've probably been in a pleasure boat before. Usually when the throttle is at idle, you can't turn the bow left or right, port or starboard, as the nautical term goes. So this may have been really, really difficult to try and keep this out of harm's way as this boat sort of careened with the course changing to the right and toward that big piling of the Key Bridge.
And Pete, the governor of Maryland insists this bridge was, quote, fully up to code. But this bridge was built in 1977. So what questions does that raise?
47 years old, really not all that old in the grand scheme of bridges. There are plenty of older bridges here in Maryland. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge, the first span of that was completed in the mid-1950s. So bridges are aging, and the American Society of Civil Engineers issues a report card every year on the infrastructure in America and specifically roads and bridges in America. So this was not a structurally deficient bridge, according to Maryland Governor Wes Moore. It served about 13,000 cars a day, a few million every year. So this is pretty critical. The good news here, and maybe the only silver lining in all of this, is that this may not pose that much of a problem for traffic in the Baltimore area because there are 2 other tunnels, the Francis Scott Key, the Fort McHenry tunnel, and then also the Baltimore Harbor tunnel. So people will still be able to get around, although this is creating a little bit of a bottleneck, at least here for now. Yeah. The good news, and maybe one more silver lining, this did not happen at rush hour, although you can't help but think of the crew that was on top of this bridge doing that pothole repair as this took place. Yeah. And the search is still on for them.
And Andy, the governor says the investigation suggests the collapse was an accident and that there's no indication of terrorism. So what do we expect the FBI doing at this moment? Have they interviewed the crew on board the ship? What questions have they posed for them, do you believe?
Well, there's really 2 things they're doing, Manu. The first is providing resources and assistance to the recovery effort. The FBI has a lot of things to be able to contribute there, not the least of which is the underwater search and rescue team. They have a lot of experience using side scan sonar deployed from boats with divers in the water to help find things, people, vehicles, whatever that might be on the bottom. And they need a lot of those resources right now with a crime scene this large. So I'm sure they're doing that. As far as the investigation goes, they are likely helping process the review of kind of backgrounds of the folks who are identified as crew members and of course the pilot. They may participate in interviews of those individuals to rule out things like terrorism or criminal activity. But all the indicators so far is that that's the direction we're headed. This seems to have been, essentially a tragic kind of industrial size accident. There may in fact be recklessness or negligence underlying some of what took place on the boat. We don't know that yet. If there is, criminal charges certainly are not impossible in those circumstances. But the big ticket items like terrorism and intentional sabotage of the vessel or the bridge, it seems that those things have been ruled out at this point.
Yeah, still so many questions. This investigation just beginning, but as the governor said, the first mission tried to see if there's any survivors. The search and rescue operation taking place. Pete Montine, Andy McCabe, thank you for that.